Now, speaking of democracy, people, and we come right back to America, and we come back to a cryptic, ambiguous, opaque post that Dan Bongino put up. I went over it yesterday very quickly, but I want to refresh everyone's memory and use it as a segue into the bulk of today's discussion about what the hell's going on in America and what the heck Dan Bongino meant by this particular tweet. Dan Bongino, Deputy Director of the FBI, wrote as follows the day before yesterday. FBIDD Bongino, FBI Deputy Director Bongino writes, during my tenure here as the Deputy Director of the FBI, I have repeatedly relayed to you that things are happening that might not be immediately visible, but they are happening. The director and I are committed to stamping out public corruption and the total weaponization of both law enforcement and intelligence operations. It is a priority for us. But what I have learned in the course of our properly predicated and necessary investigations into these aforementioned matters has shocked me down to my core. We cannot run a republic like this. I'll never be the same after learning what I've learned. We are going to conduct these righteous and proper investigations by the book and in accordance with the law. We are going to get the answers we all deserve. As with any investigation, I cannot predict where it will land, but I can promise you an honest and dignified effort at truth. Not, quote, my truth, end quote, not, quote, your truth, end quote, but the truth, all caps. God bless America and all those who defend her. Respectfully, Dan. Okay. Key words here. Director and I are committed to stamping out public corruption and the political weaponization of both law enforcement and intelligence operations. I will steelman the critique, and I saw it in the chat, and I believe it might have been a rumble rant earlier, that there are some people who say, Patel and Bongino told me that Epstein killed himself, and based on their review of the file, and I just can't trust them ever again. And I will say, whether or not it will be satisfactory explanation, if the argument was that based on their review of the file, they conclude that Epstein killed himself, that's a linguistically, semantically, and logical conclusion. If you rely on the file, and if you can rely on the file. And it was my question from the very beginning to Bongino, to Patel, to anybody asserting that based on their review of the file, Epstein killed himself. How the hell are you relying on that file? We have since now gotten confirmation, criminal investigations into the criminal FBI, DOJ elements there. Who do we have criminal investigations into? Comey, Brennan. Some might say he told me to believe the unbelievable, and others might say what he told you was that based on their review of a corrupt file, they didn't say it in these explicit terms, and there might have been reasons for which they couldn't say that. Based on their review of a corrupt file, he killed himself. But the file was corrupt. Maybe they couldn't say it then. Maybe Bondi wasn't letting them say what was on their minds. And then some people are going to say, well, they're cowards, they should leave, yada, yada. Well, there was a threat to leave shortly thereafter, and there was a remarkable, marked change in discourse and not policy, but so much tenor and discourse. Whether or not Bondi was tying their hands and saying, look, let's make this go away for whatever the reason. Bongino allegedly, according to rumors, threatens to leave. And then Trump pulls another 180, so we might be right back in the same direction, and comes out and says, Russiagate, you can't trust that file, which was what some of us were saying from the very beginning. Okay, now the question is, what did they look at? What changed them? What rocked them to their core? Before we get into that, I do want to congratulate, and you need to celebrate the good news and celebrate the hard work, because they are doing amazing stuff. Whether or not we get bogged down in what we want, we cannot ignore what they are actually providing. Let me play this video right here. This is Kash Patel talking about Operation Grayskull. That was from He-Man. By the power of Grayskull. Okay, here, let's listen to this.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kash Patel, Director of the FBI. I'm excited to announce the results of a global operation to take down 4 of the biggest child sexual abuse sites on the dark web and bring the criminals who operated them to justice. As a result of Operation Grayskull, the FBI arrested 19 subjects here in the United States, and working with our international partners, helped coordinate additional arrests in 7 more countries. Shockingly, many of these perpetrators had no prior criminal records. They were people we knew and trusted, neighbors, colleagues, even family members. They were active in our communities and around our children. This is why we must stay vigilant. Investigations like this are thorough and resource intensive. They often take years due to the complexity of tracking perpetrators on the dark web. Specialized teams like the FBI's Child Exploitation Operational Unit work tirelessly to find those who harm our children and put them behind bars. Through global partnerships and dedicated resources, the FBI works to ensure that all children have the chance to grow up safe and free from exploitation. Rest assured, we will keep hunting these criminals no matter where they are. Thank you for keeping our children safe.
Okay, if I were Patel's PR guy, I would say you got to loosen up, you got to lighten up, Patel. You got to get comfortable with the text and then not read it quite as much. But set that aside, substance over form. The FBI under Patel and Bongino are in fact doing great stuff. The argument that if you insist and criticize over the Epstein handling that you are the actual true protector of pedos is possibly the dumbest, most insane argument I've ever heard. And anybody who makes it unironically should smack themselves in the face after looking in the mirror. FBI writes, Operation Grayskull represents one of the most significant strikes ever made against child sexual abuse material website on the dark web. Every arrest in these cases not only delivers justice, it sends a powerful message you cannot hide. Now let me bring this up here so we can all see this as well. Justice Department announced the results of Operation Grayskull, a highly successful joint effort between the DOJ, FBI, resulted in dismantling of 4 dark websites dedicated to images and videos containing CSAM. To date, the operation has led to the convictions of 18 offenders, including a Minnesota man who was sentenced yesterday to 250 months. That's 20 years in prison and lifetime supervised release for his involvement in one of these dark websites. He also was ordered to pay $23,000 restitution. So they are, in fact, doing fantastic work. You come back to the Epstein stuff and you come back to Dan Bongino's, I say, cryptic, opaque tweet. And then the question is, what did he mean when he references intelligence? When I read it, and I admit I'm seeing things through the blinders of need answers on Epstein because I have a feeling it's a little bit deeper than just Jeffrey Epstein's perverted criminal predilections. I think it's something bigger, broader that involves intelligence. The question I would ask if I ever had an interview with Dan Bongino, I would ask, and I'm not sure that he could even answer it, but are you talking about intelligence as relates to the Russiagate bombshell that Tulsi Gabbard is dropping? Or, because that's where my blinders are pointing, does it involve intelligence relating to Epstein? And now might we be beginning to understand why they were not just tight-lipped, but potentially not hiding behind, but using the semantics of he killed himself based on a file which we now know to be corrupt, and we need to investigate everything within that. The 10,000 hours of videos, who knows? But in his tweet, Bongino linked, he quote tweeted himself and then linked to an article which is worth reading from Just the News right here. Let me bring this one up. 2016 intel report said Kremlin preferred GOP Dems, but actual history tells a different story. By all accounts, it looks like Bongino's talking about the corruption that he's discovering with respect to Russiagate, Comey, Brennan, Clapper, Obama, Hillary, Mark Elias, Perkins Coie, Kevin Kleinsmith. It looks like he's talking about that. And, if he's only talking about that, to the extent we all knew the level of that corruption, I would be shocked that it would shock anybody who's seasoned to their core. I would expect something more sinister, but let's just operate on this basis right now. You might only be talking about the level of depraved corruption that we witnessed in that Russiagate hoax that was a soft political coup to undermine the 2016 election. The Obama-era ICA, that's the Intelligence Community Assessment, claimed the Kremlin had a history of preferring Republicans over Democrats. But decades of Moscow history contradicts that narrative that was pushed and believed as gospel by the late. It wasn't believed. They were pushing it because they all needed Hillary to win. The Obama-era Intelligence Community, assessment on Russian meddling in 2016 election contained a newly declassified claim that the Kremlin historically preferred Republican candidates over Democrat ones, something belied by the actual historical record, while a key architect of that assessment has made questionable contention that Russia actions that year were, quote, unprecedented. These two claims seem to conflict with a lengthy Kremlin record of aggressive active measures targeting numerous U.S. elections over many decades, with the Kremlin typically, although not always, seeking to harm Republicans, albeit with at least one instance of the Kremlin trying to undercut a Democrat who was well known to be a Soviet hawk. The version of the ICA, which has been highly classified, but which was released this July, had a subheading stating that, quote, Putin ordered campaign to influence U.S. election. Beneath that subheading, the ICA contended that, quote, the Kremlin has historically preferred Republican over Democrat candidates, judging the Republicans had been less focused on democracy and human rights and were therefore easier to deal with. What a load of crap. Intelligence experts with experience in Russia disagree. Dan Hoffman, the CIA's former station chief in Moscow, told Just the News, I've never found that to be true at the CIA. Not true. They hate all of us, Republicans, Democrats. They're at war with all of us. Okay, we can go through all of this. It's a long article, and we don't really need it. History shows Russians have a long record of U.S. meddling. Okay. The bottom line that we learned last week is that there may or may not have been meddling. Some people say there's always meddling every election, therefore it's an irrelevant point to start with. But that there was no active interference. They had neither the means nor the intent. They weren't flipping votes. They weren't making fake ballots. And everything that Obama said they did with respect to Trump, they knew to be false when they said it and still pushed it anyhow to try to overthrow the democratically elected President Donald John Trump. Whether or not Bongino now has seen the interconnecting web of lies, deceit, and criminality in terms of Peter Strzok's insurance policy, manufacturing evidence, submitting it to a FISA court via Kevin Kleinsmith so they could spy on Carter Page, Hillary Clinton's campaign, financing Mark Elias and Perkins Coie to create the Steele dossier that Sussman, Hillary Clinton's lawyer, then handed to the FBI, who leaked it to Yahoo News so they could go to a secret FISA court and say, look what Yahoo News just published. We need to go secretly spy on Donald Trump while pretending not to have wiretapped his Trump towers and claim that he's a liar for suggesting that. I think we all know this. We all knew this. And now we're getting the concrete evidence that not only did they do it, they were admitting internally at the time it was bullshit. When it comes to who the Kremlin might have preferred, who do you think they might have preferred? Donald Trump, who they did not have any hooker Moscow pee-pee tapes on, or Hillary Clinton, who they actually apparently had bona fide legit dirt on? It's coming from cat turd people just because it happened to be the source where I could find it before the show. I happen to not have problems with cat turd, even if I disagree with some of his methods of dealing with people who legit and sincerely criticize Trump. I do not think being a yes man actually helps Trump. Set that aside. Cat turd, when was this from? July 23rd, 5 days ago. Writes, read this about Hillary. LOL. Hillary was suffering from intensified psycho-emotional problems, including uncontrolled fits of anger, aggression, and cheerfulness. Hillary was placed on a daily regimen of heavy tranquilizers. This is information, from what I understand, that the Kremlin had on Hillary. As of September 2016, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service had Democratic National Committee DNC information that President Obama and party leaders found the state of Secretary Clinton's health to be extraordinarily alarming, end quote, and felt it could have, quote, serious negative impact, end quote, on her election prospects. Her health information was being kept in, quote, strictest secrecy, end quote. Except for when she's falling over, passing out, leaving the satanic Cinderella shoe on the ground. Except when she's having coughing fits on stage. I'm almost forgiving on the coughing fits because I had one of those when I was first interviewing for a law firm. Like that tickle in your throat makes your eyes water and it's impossible to talk to you. I can forgive those. She was crazy. And the Russians knew it. The Russians knew even more. Here, let's go here. The SVR, that's the Russian intelligence, possessed DNC communications that Clinton was suffering from, quote, intensified psycho-emotional problems, including uncontrolled fits of anger, aggression, and cheerfulness. Clinton was placed on daily regimen of, quote, heavy tranquilizers, end quote. And while afraid of losing, she remained, quote, obsessed with a thirst for power. Russian intelligence also had information that Clinton suffered from, quote, type 2 diabetes, ischemic heart disease. That's not good. And deep vein thrombosis. Also not good. And chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So when it comes to who the Russians would have preferred in terms of who they could have more easily controlled with the dirt that they had on them, it's an inversion of reality to say that it was Republicans. It's an inversion of reality to say that the Russians had pee-pee tapes on Donald Trump. Now I'm thinking that the Russians probably, or someone, had pee-pee tapes on Hunter Biden, all of which lost their blackmail material power when Hunter Biden left his laptop and the world to see his degeneracy. By the way, hold up. Hunter Biden laptop, people. I dare even open it because it's such a disgusting, tawdry documentation of everything on Hunter Biden's laptop. Yeah, it's all bleeped out, by the way. So it's child-friendly, if we could put it that way. But it's almost like whatever blackmail material anyone might have had on Hunter Biden sort of lost its weight once the contents of his laptop made it public. But the bottom line in all of this, if the Russians were going to prefer anybody, they were going to prefer Hillary Clinton by a long mile. And, you know, the information that they had at the time, and you go back and you relive life, life can only be understood forwards, but must be lived backwards. What the heck? Life can only be understood backwards, yet must be lived forwards. I wanted to bring this one up just before going live. I remember reports at the time of Hillary uncontrollably, inconsolably crying, screaming, throwing stuff after she lost. Listen to this. Flashback 8 years ago. This was from the Steve Miltzberg show. And it makes a whole hell of a lot more sense now.
There were all kinds of reports. We had Ed Klein on the day after the election who said that he was told that Hillary called a friend of hers at 6:30 in the morning the next morning, crying hysterically, blaming Comey and Obama for not reeling in Comey. And then subsequently, the campaign did officially blame Comey. So he might have been right on target with that. Then I see reports also, and, you know, Secret Service agents involved leaked this or that Hillary was uncontrollable, not only inconsolable, but uncontrollable, throwing things, et cetera, but blah, blah, blah. You know them real well. You know her real well. What do you think went on as the night wore on and it became apparent she was the loser?
Yeah, I think that's very likely. Hillary frequently cries at times like that and gets furious, and she is prone to throwing things. I think that
prone to throwing things. Holy hell. Like, if anybody's thinking the Frazzle Drip video is urban legend, I mean, it's the stuff of nightmares, lore, you know, probably more conspiracy theory than anything else. Prone to throwing things. In my entire life, let me just think if I've ever thrown anything in a fit of anger. I can't remember ever having done it. Because it's not the thing that normal people do, by the way.
Important is to understand that the Clintons never take the blame for anything. Everything is somebody else's fault. It's like a teenager describing why he didn't do his homework or why he cracked up the car. It is always somebody else's fault. And it's very easy in this situation to blame Comey.
John Podesta, there's another man. Good. Everyone should refresh their memory on the Podesta emails, Podesta artwork.
Impressed by a leak that I think was from Ed Klein, that a week before the election, Bill called Hillary, and he was in Little Rock at the Clinton Library, and said, "You're blaming Comey for this. You're wrong. It's that your campaign staff is not listening to my advice and focusing on the economic pain of the forgotten American people."
That goes back to highlight, people, having a campaign or having an administration of yes men is actually not a good thing. Prone to throwing things, prone to crying, prone to throwing hissy fits. And you think back to some of the stuff that Bongino did not witness himself, but got firsthand knowledge of people who did witness it themselves. And you put all that together, you're dealing with demons in human form. You are dealing with actual evil that would stop at nothing to gain power, would stop at nothing to punish those who may have leaked their emails to the world, to the Russians, who knows. And in as much as I want the narrative to be the Epstein ring was in fact international blackmail that has shown that foreign policy decisions, medical decisions, science were based on blackmail, corruption, murder, etc. By the sounds of it, at least for now, and until proof to the contrary, what it looks like Dan Bongino is discussing and talking about right now in that tweet is that he has now seen firsthand the depths of the depravity to which Democrats, intelligence, the deep state would go to ensure that they stay in power. And when they had that magical, earth-shattering, paradigm-shifting loss in 2016, the depths of revenge that they would go to fabricate, lie, try to take Trump down with not one impeachment, but 2 impeachments, then try to change laws to go after him legally, try to bankrupt him, try to remove him from the ballot, try to kill him. And now Trump has been in power and his administration has been in there for 6 months. And it might be like looking into a black hole. It might be like looking into the proverbial abyss. And then I'm reminded again, I think it's Soren Kierkegaard again. When you stare into the abyss stares back. And hold on one second. What's the rest of that? It has to do with not being consumed by the void. Hold on. When you stare into the abyss stares back. It's Nietzsche, not Kierkegaard. It suggests that contemplating difficult, uncomfortable, or even horrifying aspects of existence can profoundly impact the contemplator, potentially them lead to adopt those very qualities. Here it says, when he who fights with monsters might take care. This is beautiful. He who fights with monsters might take care lest he thereby become a monster. And if you gaze for long into an abyss, the abyss gazes also into you. It's flipping beautiful. Things you can only appreciate the older you get, as you can look back at what a young, naive nincompoop I once was, to have not appreciated that the first time I studied that in philosophy when I was 21 years old.